All right, let's dive right into this explainer and explore the absolute extreme biological duality of the Arctic tundra. We're talking about a place where some really unique creatures are pushed to the absolute very edge of survival. Imagine a barren, treeless terrain that literally spans 6 different countries right at the top of the Earth. It's technically a desert, because the water there is almost entirely locked up in ice.
To really wrap our heads around this habitat, we gotta start by plunging directly into the brutal reality of its isolated 6-month winter. When they say it's quite literally cold enough to stop the human heart, they mean it. For half the entire year, this vast white wilderness seems totally devoid of life, just held hostage by an incredibly unforgiving climate where temperatures plummet to some pretty terrifying extremes.
And it's a crazy contrast, right? We're looking at a staggering juxtaposition here. 6 full months of darkness, solid ice, and pure isolation, compared to just 2 months of a summer that suddenly brings 24/7 daylight, a massive thaw, and just an absolute explosion of life. Honestly, this is a more extreme seasonal shift than anywhere else on Earth, and it demands some incredible evolutionary gymnastics from the animals that call it home. So, picture this seasonal ticking clock. It drives this built-in narrative of a desperate, frantic race to survive. You go from a complete blinding winter whiteout to the sun returning and melting the snow in spring, which is followed immediately by a frantic summer bloom under 24-hour daylight before the sun weakens and the freeze rapidly returns in autumn. Every single creature's life out here completely depends on timing this cycle perfectly. Section 1. The 6-month winter. Surviving the whiteout. Now, down at the barren southern boundary, what's known as the tree line, the climate is still so harsh that it takes hundreds of years for a simple seedling to grow into even a tiny shrub. With zero cover from the elements, you get this intense evolutionary arms race playing out between predator and prey. In one corner, we have the bison. These guys stand 2 meters tall, weigh almost a ton, and carry dense insulation plus a heavily reinforced skull. Big bodies just lose less heat. But in the other corner, we have Canadian wolves. They might lack the sheer size, sure, but they totally make up for it with deep snow stamina and just unmatched lethal tactical coordination. 25. That's the magic number for a Canadian wolf superpack. Living 800 kilometers from the Arctic Circle, they have to form this massive alliance out of pure necessity. Think about it. A single bison bull weighs more than the entire pack combined, so they have to work flawlessly as a team to isolate a weaker individual, risking fatal blows just to secure a meal that's only going to sustain them for a few days.
Meanwhile, way up on the slopes, there's a totally different ticking clock starting. A mother polar bear is waking up from a 6-month den. She has lost up to half her body weight and is absolutely desperate to nurse her 2 tiny cubs. She's got to swiftly navigate her family down this daunting mountain and out onto the frozen ocean to hunt seals. Because if she doesn't find food fast, her milk dries up and her cubs simply won't make it. Section 2. The Great Spring Thaw. The race begins.
Okay, so the sun finally returns, and darker patches of bare ground start to appear, absorbing the sun's energy and really accelerating the melt. Beneath that melting snow roof, we find the Norway lemming. This is a courageous little alpine rodent that survives the winter completely insulated under the snow at 0 degrees, just feeding on chilled mosses and basically nature's refrigerator. But as the spring thaw destroys his shelter, an intrepid young male gets forced out onto this impassable, flooded landscape. Without any camouflage, he has to make this perilous, fully exposed surface journey, literally swimming across meltwater just to find a mate. And if this little guy actually pulls it off, it's a biological jackpot. 40 times. Because female lemmings mate even when they're pregnant and can produce a litter every 3 weeks, the population literally explodes to 40 times its normal size every 4 years. This rapid reproduction rate creates just an absolute feast for the rest of the ecosystem. But here's the catch. That flooded, melting terrain exposes these swimming lemmings to a vast array of global predators. Take the long-tailed skua, for instance. This opportunistic aerial predator migrates all the way from South Africa just for this northern summer. The exact second the lemmings are forced out of the safety of the snow and into the water, predators like the skua arrive from the sky to capitalize on the bounty.
Section 3. The Frantic Midnight Sun. A 2-month window.
All right, the ground is completely bare now. And for 2 glorious months in the land of the midnight sun, the tundra totally transforms into a vivid, blooming landscape. The once lifeless terrain is suddenly bathed in sunlight around the clock. The whole place explodes with life as millions of migrating birds arrive from the south. Reindeer, being the ultimate travelers, cover thousands of kilometers just to reach the best pasture. And you even have male rough birds battling gale-force winds just to display their elaborate plumage on an open patch of ground called a lek. Every single creature is desperate to claim territory, feed, and secure a mate before this incredibly brief summer window slams shut.
Now, you might be wondering, how do plants survive this? Well, it forces some absolutely wild adaptations. Take the common butterwort. It only gets 2 months to grow in this frozen, nutrient-starved soil. So it relies on a carnivorous, step-by-step trap. First, it catches an insect with sticky globules on its leaves. Second, it curls those leaves tightly around the prey. And third, it consumes it for a vital boost of nitrogen. It's basically a secret killer, perfectly adapted to a landscape completely devoid of nutrients. But think about this. What happens when you're actually too good at surviving the cold? Take an Ice Age survivor like the musk ox. They sport literally the warmest wool on Earth to survive -40-degree winters, but then they face a brutal summer reality during these unusual 30-degree heat waves. We end up seeing these massive, half-ton bulls desperately clinging to tiny bits of shade by a stream, battling severe overheating simply because they cannot shed their thick coats fast enough. For them, summer is basically hell on Earth.
Section 4. Desperate polar predators. Racing the freeze. So as summer hits its peak, the 24-hour daylight means prey are eating constantly. And that brings us to the immense pressure placed on the tundra's hunters, who are working tirelessly to keep up with these rapidly changing conditions. We follow these exhausted Arctic fox parents who are just scraping by hunting incredibly quick birds to feed 6 boundless 8-week-old pups. The parents are slowly forcing these curious pups to explore the dangerous riverbanks and become independent. Because realistically, if they don't reach near adult size before the deadly snow returns, less than half of them will even survive their very first year. At the exact same time, down on the coast, the sea ice is just gone. Massive 220-kilo polar bears are now totally marooned on ice-free beaches. Trapped on land like this, they can lose over 2 kilos a day. These starving megapredators are reduced to desperately foraging for tiny insects in rotting kelp or relying on their specialized noses to find and fight over the rancid blubber of ancient whale carcasses. They're just doing whatever it takes to survive until the ocean freezes over again.
Section 5. A shrinking wilderness, the return of winter.
Well, September finally rolls around, the sun gets weaker, and that endless winter grabs hold once again. But there's a new, observable change disrupting this age-old cycle, creating a seriously daunting challenge for these resilient residents. 10. The data shows us that rising temperatures are causing the tree line to creep steadily northwards. This results in a staggering 10 kilometers of tundra habitat being lost forever, every single year. It is a dramatic, rapid shrinking of a highly specialized environment.
We're seeing some really clear, measurable impacts across the whole ecosystem here. Reduced winter snow cover directly jeopardizes the insulated subsnow habitats that animals like those lemmings rely on. As a result, those massive lemming population booms we talked about, they're becoming markedly less frequent. Add to that rising sea levels, shrinking the coastal hunting grounds, and the steady northward expansion of the tree line, the entire food chain is being placed in extreme jeopardy.
So what's the big takeaway from this explainer? It really comes down to this razor-thin margin of survival. Play it right and you can win the jackpot. Do it wrong and you lose everything. This ecosystem is a harsh, unforgiving desert of ice, defined entirely by short, frantic bursts of life and extreme adaptation. Which brings us to a really pressing question to wrap up. As the tundra loses 10 kilometers a year to the creeping tree line, how much longer can these specialized Ice Age survivors hold their ground? We're going to leave you with that provocative thought to ponder about the ultimate fates of this incredible wilderness. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep exploring, and I'll catch you next time.